Thank you, Brian. We'll call upon Micah again to open the scriptures to us.
Welcome back to our conference, and I am going to continue now into our third message. I'm kind of dealing with biblical manhood and specifically looking at the man David, the King David from the Old Testament. We're in 2 Samuel chapter 11, and we're looking at David's tragic, horrific fall with Bathsheba. I want to continue on in this story, 2 Samuel chapter 11. Really, I'm not giving an exegetical message, word by word here, just looking at some of the things in this story and trying to bring out a few things that have really impacted my own life and trying to pass those on to you. Now I'd like to look at these verses 6 through 16. Really, the rest of this chapter 11 of 2 Samuel deals with Uriah and now how David has him murdered, trying to cover up the sin, the horrific sin that he has committed with Bathsheba. So I want to read in verse 6, 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 6, and the following verses. Follow along with me if you have your Bible. So David sent word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab was doing and how the people were doing and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." And Uriah went out to the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of the Lord, and he did not go down to his house. When they told David, Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, "Have you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?" Uriah said to David, "The ark of Israel and Judah dwell in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house and eat and drink and lie with my wife? As you live, and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. And David invited him, and he ate in his presence, and he drank, so that he made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his lord, but he did not go down to his house. In the morning David wrote a letter to Joab, and he sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, that he may be struck down and die." And as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men. And the men of the city came out, and they fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. And the story continues there, several more verses in chapter 11, but for the sake of time, just wanted to read those verses. And really, what I want to emphasize, one of the things I really want to emphasize here is sin comes with a very high price tag. Sin comes with a tremendous price tag. And you see that really in the rest of the life of David. What a sad, sad situation. David got what he wanted, but he lost what he had. He got what he wanted, a few minutes of sexual pleasure in adultery, and then he lost what he had. And really, the rest of this chapter 11, you see that he loses one of his mighty men, possibly a good friend of his, Uriah the Hittite, the husband of the rightful husband of Bathsheba. And David has him murdered in order to cover up his own sin. What a tragedy. But sin, it comes with a very high price tag. The rest of this chapter 11, it contrasts David's stupidity with Uriah's integrity. David goes so low that he even has Uriah deliver his own death warrant. We see that Uriah, he's drunken in a, even when he's drunk, he's in a more noble state than King David when he's sober. In this story, David just goes lower and lower and lower, and the cost gets higher and higher and higher. He gave up everything for a few minutes of sexual pleasure. What a fool! Fool! What was he thinking? David, what are you thinking? What a fool. He put his relationship with God on the line. He put his family on the line. He put his reputation on the line. He put his friendship with Uriah on the line. He put the future of the kingdom in Israel on the line. David's sin and its grave consequences. We start to see them here. Look at the tangled web of sin that we weave so often. The web of iniquity. Look at the king's insanity here. Total insanity. The way that he's acting to try to cover this thing up. This is a surefire way to ruin your life. Oh, take a warning from David right here. Men, don't go down this path. Surefire way to ruin your life. Payday someday. Payday someday. The wages of sin are unbelievably high. The consequences of sin are mind-boggling. Don't you know that your sins will find you out? Oh, if I could talk to David. David, don't you know that your sins will find you out? You listening to me, brother, precious brother, don't you know that your sins will find you out? Ah, a moment of pleasure and then a lifetime of regret. He got what he wanted, but he lost what he had. That's the main point that I want to bring out several times. I'm going to echo those words in this message. He got what he wanted, but he lost what he had. And the first thing that I want to point out here, he lost a friend. He lost one of his mighty men. He stooped so low to have one of his friends, one of his mighty men, killed. Sin and temptation. Let me give you an illustration. One time, I already mentioned that I enjoy bow hunting, and one time I was in Oregon, and I was bow hunting there. This is many years ago. I grew up in Oregon. I was bow hunting for elk, and as I was hiking through the woods, a bull elk jumped up in front of me, and I see antlers going through the woods. And I had a bugle with me, and a bugle, it's a tube with a reed in it, and you blow into the tube, and it imitates the sound that a bull elk makes when he's calling to other bull elk, and he's calling to fight for the cow elk, for the females. And during the month of September, the bull elk, they're calling, they're bugling, they're fighting. And anyway, I have this bugle with me. And so as soon as I see this elk jump up, the bull, he's running through the woods, I called to him with this bugle. It sounds kind of like this. That's what the bugle sounds like. And so I bugled to him, and immediately the elk stops, probably 75 yards away from me. He stops, he twirls around, he does a 180 and comes running right back to me, thinking that I'm a bull elk, that I've got females with me. He wants to fight with me. And so I draw back my bow, and I'm waiting for him to get within range, and he comes at about 50 yards. It's a pretty long shot, but he's behind these branches, and he begins to, with his antlers, he's fighting with the branches in this tree, and snot is just coming out of his nose and his hoofs. He's pawing at the ground, and he is angry. He is ready to fight. And I've got my bow drawn back. Finally, he comes out from behind the tree, and he's broadside, and I let the arrow fly. And I'm not that good of a shot. I shot right over the top of his back, completely missed. He whirls around, goes running back down into the canyon, but I bugle again. I bugle, and he stops right in his tracks, does a 180, turns around, comes right back to the exact same tree. I draw back my bow. He's thrashing the branches. He's pawing at the ground. Finally comes out from behind the tree. It was instant replay. Second, 2 times in a row. He comes right out. This time I adjust my shot. I shoot a little bit lower, and I miss. I miss again a little bit low. He goes flying out of there, running, and the whole time he's got a cow elk with him that is barking at him, saying, "Ow, ow, ow." That's the sound a female cow elk will make. And kind of like warning him, danger, something wants to kill you, run. I bugle again. As he's escaping for the second time, I bugle, he stops dead in his tracks, turns around, does a 180, comes right back to the exact same tree 3 times in a row. This time he's pawing at the ground once again. I mean, snot and saliva, and he's just raking at the branches. He comes out from behind the tree. This time I adjust a little bit more. I let the arrow fly. Perfect shot. Got him right through the heart. We ate a really good steak that night. I'm sorry if this hunting story offends you, but it serves as a great illustration of how sin will cost you your life. You don't even realize something is luring you in. The temptation is great, but you might get what you want for a second, but then you end up losing what you had. You get what you want, but you lose what you have. Oh, sin will destroy you. The Bible shouts at us warnings. Sometimes it whispers at us warnings. Warning, something is trying to destroy you. Warning, something is trying to kill you. Run from that sin. Oh, brothers and sisters, look at the insanity of King David in this story right here. He gets what he wants, but he loses what he has. And he loses so much as you read the rest of the story about King David. And he just tragedy after tragedy after tragedy in this story. This story ought to make you tremble. That is a major point to bring out here. The story ought to really make you tremble. Even God's greatest soldiers are capable of catastrophic sins. This story serves as a monumental warning to you and to me. A great believer can do terrible things. Don't go down that path. That path will destroy you. It ought to make you tremble as you think about some of the consequences that David faced later on in his life. Think about this later on as you continue to read through the book of 2 Samuel. Because of David's sin, we read that later on Absalom, his son, David's son, revolted, and David was exiled from Jerusalem by his own son. And as David is fleeing his capital city, he was showered with rocks and insults. And in a sign of how far David had fallen, he could not even ask his own soldiers to shield him from these attacks that he's suffering by his own son and the armies that went with him. Instead, David, perhaps thinking of Uriah's murder, David surmises that the attacks may have been because God had said to these people, "Curse David, curse David." David's life had become so broken and desperate that attacks and coups may very well have been the signs of the Lord's displeasure with David's sin. Even after Joab put an end to the insurrection by Absalom, and then Joab summarily executed this pretend king, David's kingdom did not end well. Even after all of those difficult things, we see more. Years of drought, followed by the public execution of some of Saul's grandsons, and then a humiliating vigil by a mourning mother. If you remember that story, David sinned again after this, a huge sin, by conducting an unauthorized census. That sin directly led to the deaths of 70,000 Israelites. David's reign ends up being this trail of tears, in a large part brought on by his own sin, right here in chapter 11 of 2 Samuel. His huge fall with Bathsheba, David and Bathsheba, and that adulteress, and then leading to the murder of Uriah. Oh, brothers and sisters, this story ought to make you tremble. Be afraid. Be very afraid. David got what he wanted, but he lost what he had. You know, there's a story, an illustration about how Eskimos hunt wolves. Another hunting illustration for you. But the Eskimos, apparently what they'll do is first they will kill a deer or a caribou. Those are easier for them to hunt. And so then they'll take the blood of this animal and they'll begin to freeze that blood onto a sharp, double-edged knife. And they'll just freeze more and more blood onto this double-edged knife until it's this big ball of just pure blood, of course, with that knife inside of it. They'll take that blood ball then out into the woods and they leave it out in the forest, and then they head back to their igloo or wherever home is. And then they'll return the next day and they'll find several wolves all around that blood ball dead. And what happens is that the wolves, they come running, they can smell the blood. And they love blood. And so they begin to lick that blood ball. And they're licking and licking and licking, licking the blood ball until pretty soon they hit the knife. And they cut their tongue open on the knife as they're licking it. And of course, the blood is spurting from their mouth. And it hurts, but at the same time, it tastes so good. More blood, and they continue to lick it, and they continue to slice their tongue until they bleed to death. What an illustration of sin. How vice kills you. Some of you that are listening right now, there is some besetting sin that is just destroying you. It's killing you. You've got to turn your back on that ball of blood, so to speak. You've got to turn your back on that sin and run to Christ while there's still time, before that thing kills you. Another point that I would like to bring out here is something that needs to be talked about briefly anyway, and it's really backing up to verse 2, where it says that David's up on his roof and he sees this woman bathing. I guess we'll title this point right here, Bathsheba's Dirty Bath. We really need to talk about this. Women and modesty. Where are the modest women? Modesty matters. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us if Bathsheba was innocent or guilty here. The full weight of responsibility is placed on David, and David alone, for this sin, as far as we can see here in the scriptures. We don't see any of the blame placed on Bathsheba, but we can probably conclude that it wasn't very modest to be bathing in plain view. We just don't know all the details here, but the one thing that we can say is modesty matters. Women that are listening, listen, modesty matters. Please don't lower yourself into really the way that the world has gone so much, how women really are manipulating men with their bodies. Where's the virtuous woman? It's interesting to note that Satan, through the scriptures, we see that Satan really targets women. And he's doing that to this very day. The devil, look at sex sells. I mean, commercials, advertisements, everything. You can't hardly go online with being bombarded with something that has to do with women manipulating men. You see it right from the beginning of the Bible. Satan, he targets Eve. He doesn't go after Adam to eat the fruit. First, he goes through Eve, knowing that he can get Adam through Eve. Oh, he's done this from the very beginning, and Satan continues to do it to this very day. There's an illustration that really stands out in my mind about kind of this whole area relating to women. Once there was a man. He was on a flight. He's sitting there on the airplane, and he strikes up a conversation with the young lady next to him that was flying alone. And as they're talking, the man he claimed to be a millionaire, and he tells the girl, "Yeah, I got a lot of money." And as they get talking, he starts to give this offer to her, and he says, I'd be willing to spend $1 million. I'd give you $1 million for a one-night stand when we arrive at the town that we're going to be landing in. And the girl was kind of surprised by this and shocked, but at the same time flattered. And she just, "Are you serious? $1 million? You really got that kind of money?" And he's, yeah, $1 million. And so she decides to go ahead with that, and she's like, "Okay, yeah, I guess let's do that." And then after a couple more minutes, they're talking a little bit more, and the guy's like, I want to adjust my offer a little bit. I actually don't have that kind of money. I was just kidding around. I'd like to offer $20. And the girl, in utter disdain, she looks at the guy, and she's like, "What do you think I am? $20? What are you talking about? What do you think I am?" And she's very angry. And then the man, he looks at her and he says, "Well, we've already determined what you are. Now we're just negotiating your value." Ouch. Women, sisters, you are so valuable. You're a daughter of the living God. You bear his image. Oh, please be careful with your bodies. Be careful with the temptations to manipulate men. Remember who you are, a daughter of the living God. This girl on that flight, I mean, she got what she wanted, sort of, at least in the beginning. It seemed like somehow she had manipulated this man. I don't know the details of the story, but she got what she wanted, but she lost what she had in a certain sense, a dignity, at least in that story. Oh, so often with sin, that's how it is. We get what we want, but then we lose what we had. Another thing that I want to bring up here in this story is just there's this compounding interest on sin. You see that clearly. There's this compounding interest on sin. Look how one sin leads to another. One preacher said this about this story. David looked, he got hooked, he took, became a crook, and he tried to book. That's how one preacher put it. Those were kind of his points to the sermon as he went through. But it's interesting to see how one sin leads to another. David broke almost all of the 10 Commandments right here. He coveted, and then he stole, he committed adultery, he lied, he murdered, he definitely dishonored his parents, he didn't love God with all of his heart, and he obviously, he gives into idolatry. This is idolatry, the idolatry of sex. Sex outside of marriage, adultery here. Someone has said a little sin is like sand in a watch. You might think it's small, but it can stop the clock. Oh, isn't that true? Sin so often, it's like it just stops the clock. And that's the case here in 2 Samuel chapter 11, this just tragic fall of David. It almost stops the clock in so many ways. Oh, the exceeding sinfulness of sin. You've got to get serious about this. Oh, brother, oh, sister, we've got to get serious about beating this thing. One time I was preaching in the open air, and There was a great big crowd that had gathered to listen, and then after I was done, there were several people that wanted to talk to me, and there was this one guy that was kind of at the end of the line waiting to talk to me. I could tell he really wanted to talk to me badly, and finally, I was able to talk to him. He comes up and he says, "Brother Micah, I was listening to you preach this message, and I thought maybe this preacher's got an answer for me. I've got this problem." And he said, he said, "I'm a Christian, but I'm married to Gloria, but I've got this problem with Sylvia, and I'm in the vice of Sylvia. Sylvia, do you know what I mean?" And I said, "You're committing adultery with Sylvia?" And he said, "Yeah, you understand. You understand what I mean. I'm in the vice of Sylvia." He's like, "Yeah, I'm a Christian, but just every time Sylvia comes around, I just can't resist the temptation, and I'm committing adultery with Sylvia. And so what can I do? I mean, I've talked to these different pastors about this. I've read books. I've listened to sermons. I've tried everything. I can't beat this. I just can't. I'm willing to do anything." And so I said, "Oh, this is easy. I can solve this problem easily." And he was kind of looked at me surprised, like, "Well, what's the answer? You've got an answer?" I said, "Oh, yeah. What I'm going to do right now, and I'm just going to pray for you that the next time you go with Sylvia, that the Lord would strike you dead." And so I put my arm around him and I began to pray, "Lord, the next time with Sylvia, I pray that you would kill this man." And at that moment, he pushed me away and he said, "No, don't pray that." And I was like, "Just a minute, I thought you were serious about this. I thought you said that you'll do anything to beat this thing." And he was like, "Well, I am serious, but not that serious." Oh, brothers and sisters, how serious are we about having victory against temptation? How serious are we about really conquering in this area of temptation? Oh, brothers and sisters, we've got to get serious about this. This man, he's just another example of he gets what he wants, but he loses what he had. His family, his wife, so many things. David in this story gets what he wants, but he loses what he had. Another thing to bring out here is just the Bible is full of scary stories, just like this one. I mean, you can compare lots of stories here throughout the scriptures, full of stories about men that get what they want, but then they lose what they had. Think about Adam right from the beginning. Adam, he gets what he wants. He gets to eat an apple or a mango or whatever it is. He gets what he wants, a stupid fruit, and then he loses what he had. A perfect world, a sinless, not fallen, perfect world. Unbelievable what he lost. Esau. You look at the story about Esau and how he gets what he wants, a bowl of lentil stew. I don't even like lentils. He gets this bowl of lentil stew, and then he loses what he had, the birthright. He was in line to get the promises, to get all of the blessings from his father Jacob, and from his father Isaac. He sells it to Jacob for a bowl of lentils. What a fool! He got what he wanted, but he lost what he had. And then you think about Lot a little bit later in the book of Genesis. Lot, he gets what he wanted, grass. He looks over and he sees all the land over here is green. It's great for pasturing his flocks. He gets what he wants, grass. And then he ends up losing what he had. A relationship with Abraham, through whom God was going to begin the nation of Israel. He gets what he wants, but he loses what he had, grass. Later, you see the story about Achan. Achan. He also gets what he wants, but he loses what he had. You remember that story? They go into Jericho, and he actually, we see later, after the conquer of Jericho, that Achan had gone in and he stole a wedge of gold, some coins, and a Babylonian garment. He got what he wanted. He got a clown suit. And then he ends up getting some money that he couldn't spend anyway. I mean, think of it. If Achan tries to go spend some of those Babylonian coins, somebody'd be like, where'd you get that? I don't want money I can't spend. And I don't want clothes I can't wear. Achan, he gets what he wants, but then he loses what he had. He lost his life. And his whole family with him. Unbelievable, scary stories in the Bible. Samson's the exact same way. He gets what he wants here. Also a woman, Delilah. Samson, he's a he-man with a she problem. He had major problems with the Philistine women, different women. And he gets what he wants, but he repeatedly loses what he had. Loses his great strength, power from God. Then you look later with Judas. What a warning. I mean, the guy, Judas, he walks with Jesus for 3.5 years. He had the greatest friend, the wisest counselor, the best pastor. The guy might have done miracles as Jesus sent the disciples out to preach and cast out demons and all of the things that they did, Judas did on these missions trips. And then he gets what he wants, 30 stupid pieces of silver. He got what he wanted, 30 stupid pieces of silver, but then he lost what he had. Jesus. He lost Jesus. He lost the opportunity to be one of the apostles at the start of the church. Oh, scary stories. And here in this story, David, he did the same thing. He got what he wanted, but he lost what he had. You know, stories like this prove that the Bible is really God's word. It's interesting. A man-made religion would try to cover up the errors of its heroes. And David is one of the major heroes of the Bible. But here we have the tragic fall of one of the Bible's greatest heroes, and there's no cover-up. The Bible just tells us like it is. It's the story of how David got what he wanted, but he lost what he had. David missed out on what God had for him. Man, I am scared to miss out on what God has for me. I do not want to miss out on what God has for me. And sin will take you down that road to cause you to miss out on all these blessings, all these things that the Lord might do in and through you. You know, there's an illustration that I've read about in books. I've also seen this actually in the jungles of Peru, where in a village, the villagers had a beer bottle, an empty beer bottle, and they put a coin in the beer bottle, and then a monkey, a smaller monkey, put his hand into the bottle. He grabs the coin with his hand, with his fingers, and makes a fist, grabbing onto that coin, and then he tries to pull his hand out of the bottle. But since now he's got a fist, he put his hand in small, but he's made a fist around that coin. He's grabbing a hold of it. He can't get his hand out of the neck of that beer bottle. And so I was in this village, and this monkey is like trying to climb trees with one arm, and is using his tail, and he's lugging this big heavy beer bottle everywhere he goes. And I asked, how long has this monkey been like this? And they're like, oh, he's been like weeks lugging this bottle around with him. And this monkey is like a prisoner to the bottle. He could have just been up with the other monkeys swinging and having all kinds of great freedom that monkeys in the wild experience. But not this monkey. He's lugging around this beer bottle everywhere he goes, trapped. Isn't that like so many of us with sin? We refuse to let go. All that monkey had to do was just let go of the coin, get his hand small again, and take it out the neck of the bottle right there. He'd be free. Oh, if you would just let go of that sin. Now, obviously, in this passage, we're talking about sexual sin right here, but relating this to any besetting sin. Let go. Just let go of that thing. It's destroying you. It's taking your freedom away. Don't be like David here. He lost what he had. He got what he wanted, but he lost what he had. So many of us exactly like that.